Warhammer tournaments aren't fun. This is a lie. Tournaments are some of the most fun I've had. I've said it before in my first video, but I'm an introvert and I'm actually starting to wonder if it's less of that and more of I just have a small social battery. That being said, I left day 2 of my tournament less tired and I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. Hello, I am the man in the broken tower, and while I still don't know what to call myself, I am here yet again to yap about somebody nobody asked for. Well, some of you asked for it. Thanks again on the views on the last video. I'm constantly surprised people care enough to watch what I'm putting out. And today's topic is not going to be about a specific faction right now, because while this is timely, I want to get it out. We're actually talking about tournaments. My first ever game, well, my first real game was a tournament at the same Palm Springs Open back in 2022, I think. I can't remember and I can't find the email. So yeah, it was the same tournament where I got my ass handed to me by Harlequins. Fuck Harlequins. And there's actually a hilarious picture of me as well during the tournament of Index 10th edition. I think it was PSO 2023. Obviously no face, but you can imagine what I looked like. So what was different this year? Well, this year I actually went 1-3, which is kind of crazy. Actually, in terms of real scoring, I did 1 win, 1 draw, and 4 losses, but I'm going to explain that. Just give me a bit, I'll explain. Overall, my games have been fun, and I usually always have fun in my games. The only time I didn't have fun was in 2024, but that's because I felt like I was going against nothing but sweats, and I didn't have an opportunity to really build rapport with any of my opponents. It felt like everybody I was fighting was just coming in to get a win. And I actually kind of want to talk about the social aspect of our hobby just a little bit. When it comes to tournaments, you don't have to try and go win. Don't go to lose. Obviously, you don't want to throw your games, but you should also be allowed to go have fun. There is this competitive aspect. We were specifically at this tournament playing on WTC terrain, and I can say without a shadow of a doubt, I fucking hate WTC. I was flat out lied to about certain aspects of it by an opponent, so that was annoying. And apparently not all the tables were WTC, or maybe I got lied to again. I don't know. There was a lot of confusion day 1 on what the tournament, the terrain layout for the tournament was going to be. Terrain is not my favorite part of the game, but that's not the point. Going to tournaments has shown me that I'm not probably that much of an introvert. I just, like I said, have a small social battery. But being social over a game I love, it rarely gets drained. When I go to a game, I never bring anything meta. In this case, I feel like I actually brought a decent list, but I always go and try to do something stupid. Apparently, I'm known as the math hammer guy at my shop, which is kind of true. I love making up combos where I can one-shot knights, or I just pump out as much damage to like wipe out a 20-man blob, or just try to be as effective with a unit as possible. Not with my whole army, just one unit. In Magic the Gathering terms, I'm a Johnny. I want to win, but I want to win my way. Better be damned. I want to do dumb shit that'll confuse my opponent and make things either a headache or at least interesting. After all, if I don't know what I'm doing, how can my opponent counter? Speaking of which, let me talk about my list. I brought Renegade Raiders, Chaos Space Marines to this tournament, a very fast army that does a lot of objective-focused shenanigans. The main buff is that if I attack an enemy while they're on an objective, I get bonus armor penetration. This detachment is very much based off of the Red Corsairs faction, showing that they're incredibly fast and they're rather cutthroat with fighting over whatever they believe is theirs. So the entire army exists to run up the board, kill things off objectives easier, and try to stall for the rest of the game. Notable stratagems are auto-advancing 6 inches, advancing and charging, giving an entire squad precision, fighting on an objective, moving after the fight phase, and obviously Chaos of Armor of Contempt. For those of you who play Renegade Raiders, you probably are asking, why am I ignoring the transport strat? Well, that's because it's dog shit and I have something better, but let's talk about the actual list. We have 2 characters, Diodium, the Warsmith of the Reforged, and Drouskvong riding Grave March the Hellstalker. These 2 exist purely for utility, but the utility they serve is very important. For Diodium, he is my Terminator Warlord, or Terminator Lord. He was the Warlord, actually. Stacked with a 10-man blob of Terminators, all with combi weapons and as many Power Fists and Chain Fists as I can get. His enhancement was the Despot's Claim, which is, this thing is shit. On a 5-up, you get a command point. It goes off on a 4-up if you're within the enemy territory or at least 12 inches in. It did literally nothing for me day 1 of the tournament, and day 2 it was like a 50-50 if whether or not I went off. It's cheap, and that's the only thing I had points for. The Tyrant's Lash, which gives reroll advance and fall back and shoot, was probably better, but I literally was 5 points off my list. Drask and Grave March had the Mark of the Hound, giving them 6-inch Scout, which also taught me Infiltrate is just better Scout. I didn't realize you could block Scout moves with Infiltrate. It just makes Infiltrate a glorified repositioning in your deployment zone. You can't move within 9 inches of Infiltrators because it's technically still the pregame, it's not the actual movement phase, which is dumb. I think Scout should probably be replaced with you get bonus inches to the beginning of your movement phase in the first turn or whatever, but I don't know. I don't work at GW. I just make dumb YouTube videos. 2 10-man cultist blobs. These boys are very brave throughout all my matches, and one of them stayed on my objective for sticky and then screened in my deployment zone, and the other would run up behind one of the 2 rhinos. Speaking of which, rhinos, because this is the fast attachment. But what are they transporting? Why the Ruinous Raid is dog shit and why every other battle line is bad. Ladies and gentlemen, the dustiest boys around. They walk like Egyptians. They are the sons of Magnus, the Thousand Sons Rubric Marines. These bad boys don't seem crazy at all, but their rule, Bringers of Change, allow re-rolling wound rolls of a 1, but when you fight on an objective, you re-roll the entire wound roll. Now you might say, but Ruinous Raid re-rolls hit rolls. Why is that bad? Well, that's because rubrics can take flamers, auto-hitting, ignoring cover, and now AP-2 if you're shooting at an objective. I never used Ruinous Raid once. The strat should be Rapid Embarkation. Yeah, I know it works in melee too, but this assumes you're taking a Land Raider unit, and arguably the strat is also good with Havocs, but, you know, Havocs aren't good. It makes me sad. I play Iron Warriors. Moving on, the 10-man Termi squad, as stated previously. Did I state that previously? I think I stated it previously. I don't know. I always take a 10-man, despite it being hard to drop them behind the enemy, and so fat that most of the time I have to drop them at the center of the board or on the edge of the board and just walk. This is actually very effective, and you'll learn about that in the next few stories that I have so far. They're by far my favorite unit in the entirety of DSM, at least in terms of infantry. And then, the Forge Fiend. This thing is genuinely disgusting. My first ever game of 10th, I deleted a 20-man blob of guardsmen with Lord Solar Leontis, and I'm now the reason why nobody runs blobs at the shop anymore. Anyone who does learns not to do so as soon as they play me. Forge Fiends are truly the most CSM model gameplay-wise. You want to gamble with your life to do more damage? You want to do it again? And lastly, in honor of the Prince of Darkness passing, I knew I had to bring him for his first real tournament. I brought Iron Man, my Chaos Lancer, and boy did he do Ozzy proud. Rest in peace, King. Hope the concerts up top are everything you ever wanted and more. Or maybe you got a promotion down below, who knows. I was picking up a friend nearby since he didn't have a car over the weekend, so we grabbed breakfast and headed out. Instead of being at the convention halls, the tournament was actually held at the Crosby Ballroom. Crosby, not Cosby. I made that mistake when I was reading the email. And wow, is this thing, it's just insane having everybody in this big of a room. There was around 200 attendants in total, I believe, for this event. Some of them were doing Horus Heresy, some of them were doing Age of Sigmar and Old World. I'm thinking of doing Age of Sigmar next year and probably giving my Night Haunt a run here and there. I'll need more practice, but it's time to start talking about the games. Game 1, let's go. Game 1, Death Guard, fuck. So, I did not do well this game. I usually get my ass beat in round 1 unless I'm fighting someone who is just like flat out bad. But 3 Death Shroud MSUs, 2 with leaders, and a Biologist Putrefier, I think. It was the guy who had Lone Op from an ability or a relic and was just running around and giving +1 to wound or something. 3 Plague Burst Crawlers, 3 Plague Drones, and pretty much everything was equipped to kill Marines and Terminators. Pre-game, I already got fucked because Grave March got move blocked by Infiltrate, so I didn't get to use Scout really. That was pretty infuriating as I got first turn and I had no way to charge anything. Because the Disco Lord got buffed recently, so he has a threat range of around 26 inches if you give him Mark of the Hound. WTC terrain as it was set up pretty much gave no room for me to actually move. I wasn't really familiar with this layout. We've been playing GW layouts the entire time while we were practicing, so this was it wasn't even a wrench in my plan. They actually just threw the entire dump truck at me. So he went up to the left, killed some infiltrating poxwalkers, and for every game I always send 1 Rhino up north and another Rhino along the south, and Iron Man usually runs down middle unless I have a different plan. Iron Man, speaking of which, had to weather every single gun from the Plague Burst Crawlers, and wow, those things have so many guns, and I honestly think they might have too many guns, because just looking at a Plague Burst Crawler, I don't know if they have as many guns as I'm being shot at with. Maybe I'm just being lied to, I don't know. I also forgot that Shroud Deep Strike 6 inches and not 9, so Turn 2, when I was screening for 9 inches, I still got flanked because haha, 6 inches instead of 9. This game was a wash. I barely put up a fight. I don't remember much of my game other than a lot of my units got killed. Plague Burst Crawlers were impossible to move if you don't have anti-tank, and the Terminators somehow did little to no damage against these things. I think they have like a 2-up save or something insane like that. And because all these guys are equipped with anti-marine and anti-Terminator weapons, all my Terminators pretty much got wiped out. Next game though it was a spectacle. Game 2, Imperial fucking Guard. This is my favorite faction to fight. Not only did I get to fight Guard, I got to fight my favorite type of list. Horde mode, little vehicles, 1 tank, and a fuck ton of artillery. My opponent was a super fun and amazing guy. The lad brought, if I remember, 130 guardsmen with about 2 20-man blobs. I'm gonna try to throw the lists down in the comments in case people care and want to know what I fought up against and what killed me, just in case, I don't know, somebody cares. However, he wasn't just running Horde mode, he was playing Recon Element, meaning he could spend CP to designate units as distractions and make it harder for me to kill other units aside from them. The shit is dumb, and it was incredibly funny. Grave March and Iron Man sprint up the middle. He went first, so I had hordes of humans blocking me, but Forge Fiends and Melee kind of clear all that up. The mission was Terraform, which I forgot the points stack hard over time, so I wasn't doing much actions because I literally forgot I've played Terraform completely the wrong way the first time I played it. He drew almost every right card for his army against me. Bring it down, display of might, cleanse, storm hostile objective, extend battle lines, engage on all fronts, just fill the board, shoot my big units, and use shit units to do objectives. I got a few, but never at opportune times. Engage when he killed some of my units, display when he blew up my Knight and Grave March, overwhelming force when I already killed half of his models off of the objectives. But despite that, I was still neck and neck in terms of scoring. Disturbingly so. He killed my Forge Fiends, and I managed to run my Terminators from the bottom of the board all the way up to his deployment zone, melting blobs, characters, and even artillery. Iron Man, for what he's worth, charged a Commissar alone in melee and mega murdered him, but not before dying. It was fun. As I went second at the end, my cultists in my DC were ignored almost completely, and my Terminators were scoring objectives in his deployment zone. They all had to advance towards the center and were unable to make it. If I made it to the center, my cultists would have scored and I would have won. It is unfortunate as it was such a fun game, but it was also just worth it. At one point, he had a tray just full of dead guardsmen that he was having to put away in the middle of the game. It was still lots of fun and it was super close. 64 to 68. Next game. Game 3, Space Wolves. I have fucking PTSD about Space Wolves, but that's because of my friend Ruben. They always felt oppressive and I could never really fight them with AdMech. That's because the fight phase I've learned after playing 40k for a while is an inevitability. I can't do anything to stop it. This time I have Terminators, I have Knights, I have a Disco Lord. The Disco Lord shot across the board to try and take out whatever the Space Wolf equivalent of Blade Guard vets is. I think they're called Head Takers. Only to not hurt the squad much, and then ended up getting charged by fucking Bjorn and one-shotted. This WTC terrain we've been playing on is complete ass. I finagled my way with Iron Man to get into melee with the Head Takers and Bjorn, taking out Bjorn as he charged me and slowly whittled down the Head Takers over time. Is this how Iron Man's involts feel? Fuck. There was a 20-man blob with Ragnar going down south to meet my Thousand Sons, while the ones up north were setting Thunderwolf Cavalry on fire, as well as beating one to death with bare fists. The Sorcerer whiffed all of his attacks, and 9 other Thousand Sons just tore the Space Wolf and his Thunderwolf apart with their bare hands. Remember Prospero, motherfucker. As my Thousand Sons at south were about to get charged by Ragnar's blob and some Thunderwolf Cavalry, my Terminators deep striked behind my Thousand Sons so they could try to assist, heroically intervening against the Thunderwolves and wiping them out, cleaning up Ragnar and the remainder of the squad as the T-Sons fired Overwatch with their flames and cooked up a third of the blob. Terminators didn't even really give Ragnar the glory to die in melee and just gunned him down with combi bolters, just riddling him with mortal wounds. It was this and the guard game where I learned that opportunistic raiders, the strat where you move out of phase, is just super good, as it means that throughout the whole round, my Termies can move at a minimum 17 inches with 2 command points, no advances. Logan Grimnar and his tanks wiped out my Forge Fiends, and Iron Man finally mops up the last Blade Guard veteran and then charges a poor Phobos lieutenant my opponent forgot about shoving his drill up where the sun don't shine. Logan eventually charged, whiffing all of his attacks on Iron Man, only for him to die to shitty power weapons, because Saga of the Beast, or whatever his detachment is called, gives lethal hits on Iron Man. Iron Man didn't explode, but my Terminators walked all the way up to his objective in his deployment zone, murdering his Gladiator Lancers, both of them in melee, and then gunning down an infiltrator squad. At the end, this lands me 75 to 78, because I forgot to add Purge the Foe to my fucking score. I literally had Overwhelming Force as a secondary in the 5th battle round, I scored it, and I didn't add Purge the Foe. Every time I killed more of his units than he killed mine every single round. So in reality, this game was actually 83 to 78. We already scored the game, and the ranking really doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is knowing that I improved and that I am improving enough to where I am winning more of my games than not. So at the end of the day, I am 1-2. In the actuality of the scoring, I am 0-3. I head home, I ate pizza, and I collapsed in my bed and wait for day 2. Day 2 was the day we were all dreading. Tired, our asses beated, and actually talked to one of my friends about not stressing about games. He would eventually have a chiller time, but his ass was not happy after he learned he and I scored our games wrong, and I always suggest that people take something dumb or fun than meta. Winning is good, but winning it with bullshit is a whole lot better. The moral victory is always superior. Pairings are up. It's time for Game 4. Game 4, Chaos fucking Knights. For those who don't know, Chaos Knights are pretty good right now. That, not just as a stat checklist, they're unironically good right now, especially they could do War Dog spam pretty well because everybody's points have gone down. It's a lot easier to spam Big Knights. That being said, my opponent brought a Porphyrion, and Bloodthirsters and Bloodletters, Knight Tyrant, Knight Carnivore, or I'm sorry, War Dog Carnivore, and Knight Rampager. It's a short list, so I actually remember what he brought. The game plan was the same. Throw my Disco Lord up into melee to distract and have my Lancer take on the main force. I get turn 2, which means I just hide like a bitch and I force him to come to me. Throw a Porphyrion watches down mid as the Tyrant moves for the center objective, his Carnivore and Rampager meeting me down south. The Disco Lord gets into melee with the Porphyrion, and then the Porphyrion just decides to one-shot my Lancer. Fuck. Thousand Suns remain on the flanks, and one shooting a Rampager that touched an objective with his little toe and overwatched him while he was still touching the objective as he charged me, and I whittled him down to 9 fucking wounds. This is why I like Thousand Suns. The Carnivore goes untouched pretty much the entire game. Eventually my Terminators deep strike into his deployment zone because he just left it fully open, and I make a mistake. As I deep striked on his turn, I had plenty of room to drop onto his sticky objective because he has a night stratagem where he can sticky his objective and it actually holds OC rather than just says it's his. Between his stuff being in the way and the terrain being weird, I didn't measure properly and I wasn't able to take his objective. I could have, and that would have won me the game, as we'll talk about other stuff later, especially something that's actually hilarious. My Disco Lord ends up sandwiched between a Porphyrion and the Knight Tyrant in melee, surviving another round of melee, and my Terminators start charging along and demolish the Porphyrion in melee pretty handily. Then it explodes. The Porphyrion explodes 2d6. This sucks. He murders my Disco Lord, cuts my Termies in half, and my Thousand Suns in half, and the nearby Rhino gets dropped down to a single wound. Terminators clean up the Knight Tyrant and start going down the middle where the Bloodthirster ends up meeting them, and then behold, the Beer Thirster in all of his glory. Yeah, I didn't want to be an asshole. He would lose Painted Army on this, but the guy was struggling to find a Bloodthirster for God knows how long, which was kind of surprising that he never managed to find one unless he was trying to get a good deal. But if I was being a dickhead, the Beer Thirster would have lost in Painted Army and he'd be losing 10 points, meaning I would have handily won this game. But I'm here to have fun. I'm not here to criticize somebody because they couldn't bring a stupid piece of expensive plastic. The Beer Thirster ends up confronting my Termies and cuts them all down as we get him down to 3 wounds. Termy Lord falls on the center objective and there's no hope in sight. Until the Forge Fiend comes out with the steel chair. 3 wounds exactly. Dev wounds specifically. It's so stupid that this ended up happening. God, it's a bottle of beer. Why are my tournament games turning into home games? This shit's so stupid. Oh my God. And towards the end of the last round, because of bullshit Chaos Knight sticky objectives, I am down 44 to 47. draw Established Locus, and recover assets. I'm unable to do Established Locus because I have nothing in the midboard that didn't fail Battle Shock. Doing Established Locus wouldn't give me enough points to actually tie. What I have to do is recover assets. My T-Sons in No Man's Land are very brave and able to do it. My Rhino stuck in his deployment zone is not brave, so he's unable to do it. So this means the Rhino, that has been stuck in melee with blood letters for 3 rounds of combat, has to pass Battle Shock and make it back to my deployment zone, right in front of a War Dog Carnivore at full wounds, while I only have 6. It's a risk I have to take. He falls back after 3 rounds of combat, drives right in front of the Carnivore, and does his action. What does the Carnivore do? He overwatches. He has fucking heroic intervention for the same amount of command points, and he overwatches. I get my 3 for recover assets, and we tie. Like I said, I would have won if I didn't give him Painted Army, and if I rapid ingress properly, or if my Rhino didn't fail Battle Shock while holding his home objective, which would have been great, but I didn't have the CP for Insane Bravery, I don't think. It was a fun game. I actually fought this guy before. I think I fought him in the first PSO, and he was also playing Knights back then. I might be wrong, but regardless, next game. Game 5, Gladius Ultramarines. Yeah, this shit was a stomp. It was in my favor. I'm sorry. Ultramarines with Calgar against the guy I know at the shop. He's a cool dude, but man, he was on a losing streak, and it didn't get any better when he faced up against me. I charged the Lancer and Disco Lord up. Disco Lord died as usual on turn 1. He exists to eat bullets for the Lancer. My Forge Fiends gunned down a Dreadnought and gave a 9-inch charge for my Lancer as he decided to go down south rather than sit on the center objective, and made a 9-inch charge into a Land Raider with Terminators and the Librarian. The Land Raider got fucking demolished. Termies and Infernus Marines torpedoed the Lancer all the way until turn 4, as we get flashbacks of those Blade Guard veterans, or head takers, whatever they're called. My Termies ran up the board, killing a squad of Hellblasters and Calgar with some Blade Guard veterans. Yeah, they just beat Calgar to death. It was not going well. I think Calgar with all of his attacks in 1 round of combat. There was a group of Eliminators that have just been running around all game harassing me, and the Terminators managed to catch up with them. I had Sabotage like turn 1 and completed it on his terrain in turn 5, holding his objective. He drew so many decent cards, but he never scored high, which fucking sucks. I play Sally's, so I know what's supposed to be used in a Space Marine list, and he was missing a few things. He deep striked a squad of Jetpack Assault Intercessors between 2 Forge Fiends, and honestly, bad dice really fucked him over. I nearly tabled him. I just left 2 Infernus Marines alone so they could score at the end. Not 2 like Infernus Marine units, like 2 models. That was his whole army that was left alone. At the end, it was 83 to 33. It was not great, but I'm 3-2 technically speaking. So let's go to my last match. Emperor's Children for game 6. I've never fought Emperor's Children. We had 2 people at my shop who bought the big boxes, and one of those people sold their boxes back. Not to the shop, to someone else, I mean. They're really, really fast and very annoying, but my opponent was super chill. Not to brag, but I was told every time when I matched up with somebody, I was their favorite game. Unless that person was a meta-hugging fuckwad, but, you know, I'm not trying to talk shit about my first opponent that much. This isn't just me assuming. I'm genuinely told by my opponents that I'm the most fun game that they have. That's probably because I like to joke around a lot. I will literally, like, make jokes, talk shit, like, in a healthy way, not rude. And I never get mad if any of my units die or if a vehicle dies, because I kind of just want to explode. Speaking of exploding, that doesn't happen this round, which is very sad because that would have been fun. This game was very funny, and I could tell my opponent was stressed. They were 0-5 and not having a good time, but luckily I was there. Second verse, same as the first, the T-Sons go north and south, the Disco Lord runs mid, and my Lancer this time decides to run along north towards their deployment zone. My opponent put all of their army up in the corner of the map, very defensive, to the point where their Mauler Fiends, which have las cannon punches, were running back to the deployment zone to hide from my Lancer. It was hilarious because we were doing Scorched Earth, so I was burning No Man's Land while Iron Man was just T-posing outside of the ruins to display dominance. Thousand Suns trading blows with Noise Marines down south. My T-Sons and Rhino remain untouched up north until much later. My Disco Lord barely survives melee in the center against, I think they're called Infractors, and eventually runs off, only to come back to later contest the objective before things get really, really bad. I'm scoring pretty far ahead for most of the game. At this point, I'm 60-30 at round 3, and god damn did my opponent kick the switch and started hauling ass. Iron Man charged and took out a group of noise marines that hopped out of a rhino, and then everything near the deployment zone charged out and surrounded him. 2 demon princes, infractors, tormentors, mauler fiends, everything. Meanwhile, Lucius gets into melee with my terminators and snipes my lord, all the while they work to try and kill him, to the point where I have to fucking tank shock a rhino into him and it still doesn't kill him. 3 turns of me running my tracks along his face and I could not get his last wound off. Fucking feel no pains, man. Terminators got wiped, probably because they also got pinned by a demon prince as well, which, by the way, did you know that demon princes like can move 20 inches in this army? That shit's crazy. Lucius is saved and the mid starts getting flooded by Emperor's Children so fast that they take out my Disco Lord and the Forge Fiend that were sitting on the center. The 2 demon princes, with all of their insane movement, managed to fly all the way to my home objective, where one starts setting it on fire and the other locks down my last remaining unit of cultists so that way they can't interrupt the action. The game ends, honestly, not that bad. 75 to 85. I'm sorry, 87. It was a great fucking game, and I managed to make someone struggle bus on a tournament fun. If we're counting points and shit correctly, I went 3-3, and this is the best I've ever done in a tournament, and you know what? I'm gonna take that. I don't care what the score says, this is mine. If I did get paired up with other winners, I might have been fucked, but I was 1-4 into round 6, and I got paired up with someone who was 0-5, so I'm not gonna give up my 3-3 score. That's just me. What worked in my list and what didn't. Disco Lord, as much as I love him, he wasn't doing much aside from being a distraction in the bullet sponge. That being said, he was very good at it because everybody assumes he's a lot stronger than he actually looks. He's a lot more expensive than he actually looks too. Jesus Christ. My Chaos Lord literally existed just to give command points and also help take out tanks because he hits with his chain fist on 3s rather than 4s. Also, giving a street frat is pretty good. Cultists are always good for sticky and screening in your deployment zone, but past that, they don't really do anything. 1,000 cents though. Ooh. I would argue that these guys are an auto-include in Renegade Raiders since they synergize so well right now. I've seen people take Legionaries, and I don't get why when 1,000 Suns all get Flamers, have a 5-up invuln, and work well into fighting enemies on objectives. Sure, they need a Rhino to get anywhere, but you're doing Renegade Raiders, you're always taking Rhinos to begin with. My Forge Fiends did okay. Not fantastic, but for the points, they were chipping wounds off of knights and tanks and melting infantry. I think they're finally at a good price where they need to be, and it took all of my will not to take 3 of them and only took 2. 2, I feel, is a good spot you want to be because when you lose 1, you're probably in a bad spot anyways, and if it gets to where you lose 1 and then you lose 2 and then you lose 3, it just feels worse, and that's just so many points gone. It's like 540 or something crazy like that. Now for Iron Man, my Lancer. He either did great or he did jack shit. My knight friend always tells me it's the pilot and not the knight, but in a way I disagree with him. It's really just down to the dice, especially for knights combined with WTC terrain and being paired up with whoever and whenever. Some of the lists in the tournament were purely anti-knight. He fought against one of those playing his knights, and there was just an Eldar list that just absolutely melted him. Sometimes Iron Man just whiffed all of his invulns and decided that it was his time. Other times he sat for 5 full fucking rounds and was completely untouchable. Knights, as a model, are a damage check as to see whether or not you're able to kill them. It's hard for most armies to tech fully into knight armies, but it's not hard for an army to tech into a single knight. See what I mean? One knight is different to fighting 5 of them. Overall though, my MVP is Iron Man. He weathered so much damage and remained a sturdy distraction when Grave March couldn't take the heat. As for my LVP, it's definitely the Cultists. I say this because all they were needed for was sitting around, whereas my entire army cleared house and fought tooth and nail. Terminators marched up the board so many times uncontested, rubrics were barbecuing like it was the 4th of July. Even my Rhinos blitzed all over the board to get objectives done. And the Cultists? They were vibing. Overall, PSO was amazing, as always. Having everybody in such a massive room made it seem much more lively, and it was kind of warm, but I also live in a desert and we're all sweaty nerds, so that was just bound to happen. It was worse last year, or the year before, when the AC shut off. That was horrendous. I want to end this video off by saying that if you're nervous about going into a grand tournament, don't be. They're all fun, and you should go in with an attitude of just doing dumb and fun shit. You're gonna get your ass beat. Hell, I did too for my first tournament, but going in with a mindset of having fun over winning is what keeps me sane playing these games. That would be my biggest piece of advice to anybody scared of going into a tournament, is to go in for fun, not to score. You will have games where you get stomped, but what does it matter if you do something like tank shock somebody with a rhino or run away all game to narrowly escape death? There will be meta players no matter where you play, at the store, online, or with your friends. I find my friend who plays Knights, I generally consider him a good friend, and he seems to struggle with this mindset a lot, to have just fun and easy games, but it's also because he kind of gets paired up with the sweatiest people somehow. I say this as a person who doesn't give a damn about what others think of me, and I never really will. How you present your personality can change a lot about somebody's attitude in the game. Be friendly, be a good sport, don't be afraid to joke or fuck around. I've gone to tables where people seem utterly defeated only to leave the game with them smiling, and that feels good, knowing that you can brighten up somebody's day when for them they've spent all this time, all this money, all this travel just to eat shit at a tournament, but you still can make them smile. I want to leave you with this. Apparently, since I end every episode with a quote now, and this episode is no different, from Jagatai Khan of the Primarch of the White Scars: to experience joy is an act of challenge. By our joy, we win even if we must lose, because we all die. Death is of no importance to the warrior who laughs. Thanks for watching.